Okay. There's a lot of slides. Some of them I'll just breeze over because they're not as relevant. Okay. So there are many different messages that could come up in the event of an operating system not coming up. So whether it be hardware issues, software issues, or nothing displaying at all, we'll go over what you do in each of those situations. So boot manager, we'll go over a little later how you can kind of work on that. Basically, we'll end up using utilities that are built into Windows to fix these. So there's a process to the boot when it initially turns on. So you get the BIOS that comes up and it runs post to make sure all of your physical components are in working order. Then it passes off control to the boot manager of Windows, which looks for all the proper boot files. At that point, boots into the OS, and the OS takes over from there. So in that case, the boot manager was corrupt, and it would need to be repaired by the install disk. So there are 3 viable ways to repair the OS in case of not being able to boot. You can attempt to repair it. You could do a backup restore, or you could rebuild the entire PC. And those are really the 3 main options you have. So recovery console is kind of what you're talking about. This is just what XP looks like, and you would end up hitting R instead of Enter to repair the OS. And recovery console will attempt to fix your issues automatically. Usually it doesn't work, and then you have to use one of these commands. Not all of the available ones are in here, but most of them are. Primary ones are the ones that are available here. You'll end up using this disk part, dir, check disk, and maybe even make directory, possibly format. One of the ones that isn't here that you will use, bootrec, to fix boot issues, and that's really the main one. So the fix MBR command only applies in XP. In 7 and Vista, and above, you have to do bootrec and then do / fix MBR or fix boot. So it's not actually its own command anymore. So missing files, it'll pop up with the error telling you, generally not the exact file that's missing, but it'll tell you the service that's associated with those files is not able to boot as a result of missing files. And by going off that, you can look up the error and pop in the install disk and copy over the files that got corrupted or are missing. Of course, this would be much easier if we all actually made our backups as we tell everyone else to do. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way because you kind of have to go out of your way to do it, and it's just another thing. And then just rebuilding and just reinstall the OS, which will always work in theory. And another one is called BCD Edit. That's another program that you'll definitely need. Very valuable, use that many times. And then there's Windows PE, which is basically the replacement for Windows Recovery Console that was brought in Vista and now is the current replacement for it. And it's not only used on the install disk, but also on network boots. So it can be used with network boots, or it can be used with distributing operating systems via network if you want to do unintended installs, meaning that you have limited or no human interaction in the install process, which is nice because then you avoid any possible human error during the install process. So you can hit F8 during Windows 7 boot, but you have to do it like really fast. If you don't do it fast enough, it'll fly right past it and boot normally, and then you'll have to restart and try again. Another thing that's highly recommended is creating a system repair disk, which no one else does. Everyone just doesn't do it and then they regret it later. System repair disk is independent or dependent on the PC that you created on. So if I have an issue and I don't have a repair disk, I can't take, Andy's repair disk and put it in mine. It won't work. You make the disk on yours and it'll only work on yours, which is good and bad. I guess in the aspect that someone else can't come up to your machine with their disk and just get into it like it's no big deal, but at the same time, you still have physical media that someone could find to get in. So, I mean, it's a balance, how often you actually get locked out that you would need it. Not very often. So this is what the menu looks like when you hit F8, or if you have a problem booting, it might get to this menu. Now that's just a menu for creating the system on hard disk. So these are some of the options that it will do or has capability to do. I haven't had to deal with drivers, but it does have the capability to roll back drivers or install new drivers if you have them like on a USB disk, or they do support floppies as well, in case you have a driver file that small. And then this is the new recovery environment for Windows 7, which looks similar to Windows PE environment. And then that's the startup repair, which can theoretically fix your issues automatically. Most of the time it cannot, like this screen shows. While it may not necessarily be able to fix your issues every time, it's still a valuable tool because it can show you what it tried and what it found to be a problem. So you can at least find out what the problem is, even if you have to manually fix it yourself. So you're still getting a step further, even though you haven't actually fixed it yet. So by default, if you have a boot issue, the next time Windows 7 boots, it'll boot up into that environment and try to fix it. It probably won't work, and then you'll have to look up the error and fix it yourself. And that's just what it looks like. And then if you have any system restore points, you can restore them here. Some people like to create a restore point after they do a major change to their OS, like installing a service pack. It's similar to doing a snapshot in VMware, except it doesn't capture every change. It's mainly just OS level changes. It's not like, I changed, this one document for work. And you can just tell that Vista and 7 are basically identical. They call the restore utility a different name, but it's essentially the same thing. And then if you have your backup image in a different location than where it defaultly saved by default, then you just select where that is here. I don't think it supports network images, but I know you can put like USB drives or DVDs, what have you. So when you do restore options, you can reformat it in case you might have a virus on your NVR, which is possible. And you hope that it's not a part of that restore point that you made. And then it's just progress bar. Memory diagnostic tool. It's just a MEM test. It just tests your physical RAM to see if there's any errors with it. You probably won't have to go in here that often, if ever. This is what it looks like. And then this is what it looks like when it's running. Pretty basic. It can't fix any of it though. It'll only tell you if it finds something, which is good enough. Because usually memory problems are hardware level. Alright, Event Viewer, this is one of the most valuable tools you'll end up using in Windows because it can tell you every event that occurred, including blue screens. So the events are stored in categories as follows. Application, security, and system are the primary categories. And it's kind of like drinking out of a fire hose with these, so you really want to be familiar with how to create custom logs and filter your logs. So if you just had a blue screen within the past 10 minutes, you could filter the current log for those 15 minutes to see in and around where that issue occurred, and see if it's an application of there's something wrong with Windows, maybe it occurred after you installed an update, etc. Endless possibilities. But that's right over here. So you go in there and then you get a pop-up dialog that allows you to select what categories you want to choose from and your date range as well. And I think you can limit how many events you want to view. So if there's like 500 things that occurred within that half an hour or whatever, you may want to see the first 30. You can do that. So, yep, I kind of went over that. Yep. Okay, basically this is it's like BCD edit or bootrec, but it's in a GUI form. You don't really need the GUI, especially because it's kind of useless when you really think about it, because you can't run it on a PC that's having boot problems because it can't boot. So I guess the only possibility is if you tore the Windows drive out of another PC and had like an external mount, I guess you could use this. It's just another program to learn. Honestly, just get used to the command line you'll find it on every Windows PC, so you're not going to have to worry about it being installed. So this is a third-party program. It's not built into Windows. So GUI problems. The most common problem that will make this occur is driver's hands down every time. I almost guarantee it's a driver issue if you can't boot into the GUI. The only other possibility is that your hardware is just not supported with Windows 7 or whichever revision you're using. So if you get a BSOD, boost ring of death, something is horribly wrong to the point where it can't even recover from the issue. In that case, you really need to look into it. Hopefully you can boot in to your OS to see the error. Otherwise, I think it saves the error in a log file. You might be able to bring up a Linux boot CD and open the file, but I've never had to do that. So then in that case, you would just take this error right here and plop it into Google. If you don't find anything with that, then this hex code here is what you're going to want to put in, and that'll point you in the right direction. So all they're saying here is just stay basic. Start on a hardware level and work your way up. If taking it out stops the problem, you know it's something with the device, even if it's not hardware. So you know it's with the device. If you reset the driver to default before you put it back in and it works, then you know it's a driver issue. Simplest things first. Occam's razor. Okay. This doesn't happen very often, but apparently it can. So know what this is. So in the case that your registry gets corrupted, you're kind of screwed, unless you made a backup. But nobody backs up their registry because it's rare that it has issues. It's just kind of there. It just works. I really don't find it necessary to back it up. I've never had an issue with it.
I've never done it.
I mean, unless you purposely screw around with it, you go in there to do a hack, it's probably not going to break. And then these are just some of the files that you can restore to fix the registry. Once again, haven't really needed to, but... Oh, look at that. They actually keep a backup of the registry automatically. That's cool. And in case none of those backups are good enough, then you can just take it off of the install disk. Yep, talk about that. Safe mode. So the best thing about safe mode is that when it boots up, it takes all of the drivers and sets them to Windows generic drivers, which will strip down everything. It will disable all startup services and programs and only enable what is essential for Windows to start. And this is really nice if you're having boot problems, or every time you boot up, you know, an ad pops up or something. Then you know that it's something with a startup program or a service, not something with Windows itself. So it's a good place to start. In addition, if you get a virus, then you can make sure that the virus can't get any further. You can run some antivirus and fix it. And then that's just what it looks like. msconfig, easy way to get into safe boot in case you can't hit F8 fast enough, or it doesn't pop up because you can't boot. Networking or with command prompt is optimal. There's really no point to just doing regular safe mode, because if you don't find an issue by just booting up in safe mode, there's nothing you can do to investigate further. So command prompt is really the most valuable, but you might need networking if it's like a domain machine and you're trying to log in with someone who's never logged into that machine before. So let's say it's an end user's device and you're on a domain in a business and you want to log in as your accountant with that administrator account. You're going to have networking to download that profile to a local cache version. Or you can just log in as that person. VGA mode, that's just dumbing it down to 800 by 600 with a default VGA driver. It's very difficult to work. Last known good configuration. I've never had that work. Yeah, last known good configuration. I don't know what your definition of good configuration is. Okay. Alright, so disable drivers, signature enforcement. So sometimes you'll get drivers that haven't been verified by Microsoft, or in the new version they're not verified anymore because they're so old. In that case, you'd want to disable it. It just won't leave you alone. So it should be okay in most cases. Let's see, we talked about that. That's just what it looks like in XP. Yeah, you've done this stuff before. Yep. Kind of talked about that. Some programs will have the automatically log into your computer built into them. If you want them to stop optimally, you want to stop them in the program and not by Windows, if you have the chance, because what will happen is as soon as you start up the program, after you've disabled it in Windows, it'll just re-enable it. So if you have the capability in the program, just use that. Okay, automatic manual or disabled mode. So automatic means that if the program tries to start up automatically on boot, it will be allowed to do so. Otherwise, it will start disabled, or off, I should say. Manual meaning when you start up, it will be shut down or in the disabled state until you manually click on it and start the service. And then disabled, it will not start at any circumstance, even if you told it to start, until you set it to a manual or automatic state. Most cases, it's automatic. So in this case, it's just a service that's not running, whether it's manual or disabled, or just has been stopped for some reason. Delayed start is kind of nice if you want services to start before this service starts. Like if you don't want Java to pop up as one of the first things. Task list and task kill if you want to see current tasks running in command prompt. Basically, if you don't want to use task manager. That never works. Action Center is kind of nice. It's just a brief overview of security status, update status, any problems, firewall is enabled, just basic low-level things that end users should have set. For advanced people like us, we'll probably ignore it. and disable any warnings it tells us because we know what we're doing. And then it has links to common things that you might need. So you'll probably end up seeing this one almost every single time, and then you can just click turn off and it'll leave you alone about that forever. And then these are just some checkboxes and settings for other things that you can tell to not bother you about. Like if you have a virtual machine and you don't want it to bother you about virus protection because you don't care, then you can do that. Performance information and tools, these are just some of the things that it will, that it has the capability of showing you. So it kind of like grades you on the performance of your PC, and the lowest number is what your grade ends up being. It doesn't really mean much when you I remember when it first came out, people were like, oh, my computer scored a 7.2. What'd yours get? 4. Yeah. They're like, well, it doesn't really mean anything because if RAM is a little slower than another guy's RAM, but you both have fast hard drives, it's not that much slower. But if he has a slower hard drive and still fast RAM, yours is probably going to be faster. But it all depends. Okay, autorun.inf. It's just a file that Windows looks for every time you put a disk in, or a USB drive as well. And it gives it a set of instructions to perform after it's been inserted. If it doesn't find it, it will ask you what you want to do. It's a lot more used in Windows XP. It was also used to deliver viruses, which was clever. So that's why they kind of didn't use it as much now. Most programs now will be smart enough to install dependencies that they need, such as .NET, which just provides additional functionality to the programs that they need. Oops. Yep. Okay. You obviously need administrative privileges to change any system level functionality or installing or uninstalling programs. There's compatibility mode, but it doesn't really work. I've seen it work sometimes with XP programs. If you have problems with XP.
I've used it a couple times with success.
Yeah, sometimes.
Some small programs.
Yeah, but it's spotty.
Yeah.
Spotty at best. But like, yeah, I can just, run it in the mode and it'll work right. Yeah, so you can run it in different resolutions and lower color schemes. Yep. Should not be running a program that ran in Windows 98. Of course, that list is a lot more expanded now, because so many OSs have come out now. Okay. Oh, there it is. Windows 7. Newer settings enable or disable Arrow, which is just the fancy looking desktop features that they added in. I think they actually added them in 7, or at least the name itself. Okay. Yep. So you can always download Windows XP mode, which at one time was an actual virtual machine like this. But now you can actually run it, and it runs in the background as this, but you don't actually see it. It just runs on your desktop. But when it first came out, it looked like this, and I think they did that on purpose just so they could show that they did it. Like, guys, look at this. You can run Windows XP in 7, just in case. Ever download a DLL file manually. Yeah, we'll get you this replacement DLL file. We promise it doesn't have any viruses. It might work, but at what cost? Okay. This should not be on here. So the most common side effect I'm going to use as, and the problem with crashing programs is that if you have open files, when it crashes, you could potentially corrupt those files or programs, make them unusable, and tons and tons of other issues. Hopefully you don't get a boost room of death. So just something to keep in mind. It's not necessarily Windows. It could just be a crappy program, poorly designed, kind of like Chrome, which is a giant memory hog. But at the same time, each tab is a separate process. So if one of them starts acting up, then you don't crash the whole browser. Volume shadow copy service. So this is kind of nice because you can actually back up files that are currently in use. Previously, before this, if you tried to back up a file that was currently in use, you would get an error, and then it would skip the file, so it wouldn't back it up, which is very bad. So if, let's say, a business liked to do an incremental backup during the day in case their servers crashed in the middle of the day, then they wouldn't lose the entire day of work, they would only lose a half day of work. Then they could use VSS or a technology similar to it to make sure that they have the most up-to-date files. Yep. Okay. Alright, then there's system protection, which is kind of like incremental backups, but an automatic Windows thing. So basically it detects a version change and updates it, keeps a local copy of it. I have to remember if you actually set how many it keeps or how long it keeps, or if it automatically does it. Let's see if they go over it. So there's actually two things you have to do to get system protection enabled. You have to enable it on the physical drive, which is here. So if you go into My Computer Properties, it's one of these tabs named System Protection, and then you have to enable it on whatever drive you want it to be on, and then you can manually create restore points down there, and then of course there's settings as to what you want it to protect. Alright. A third of the way there. Alright, I am going to breeze over FireWire because that's something that's not used as much. RS-232, you will see, believe it or not, despite its older technology, it can be used with external devices. I've seen it used with manufacturing equipment. They still use serial interfaces. Not all of them, of course, but the older ones, they don't need, fancy network communication. They just need a basic back and forth set of instructions to do what they need to do. So, and then of course modems. And part of the problem with serial ports is they're not on every PC. They've actually kind of been phased out for the most part, but you can still buy USB to serial adapters, which are relatively cheap, fortunately. I'm in skip over it. Okay, so the way USB works inside your computer is you can think of the computer ports on your computer kind of like a USB hub that you would normally plug into one port outside your computer. So each pair of ports is like a hub, and those two ports share the bandwidth of USB bandwidth available. So if you have 6 ports, then you have bandwidth that each pair of ports is sharing. As it kind of shows here, it's the host controller actually controls all of the USB functionality, and then the root hub is just physical connectivity to the ports themselves. So they all share in the end, they all share the bandwidth, but the intermediary bandwidth and the actual hub itself is by pair, which is what this blocks symbolize. Okay, but leave me alone. I think somewhere in here they include USB 3, but I wouldn't worry too much about USB 1, even though technically it's possible you could find a device that has it. It's unlikely now. USB 2 has been around for so long now that it's unlikely to see one. But it is possible that you'll see a USB 2 capable machine only running at 1 as a result of it being disabled in the BIOS. Excuse me for 1 second, it's my boss. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah,
I went up to fourth and just nailed one.
Nice.
For
Congrats.
We were looking out of the shop.
Can you explain it to Andy real quick?
We were doing the PCAP. There's a SHA in the PCAP, but then we backpedaled a few packets.
Well, explain to him what context. What are you doing it for?
For the FNCL, we found some packets. So we thought we would have to brute force hashes, custom hashes. Then we went back a few packets, and we're looking through. I'm like, wait, that kind of looks like base 64. So Charlie's he broke it up and started pasting it in, but then he pasted literally the entire chunk of data, NCL. And they're I think they're trying to throw us a curveball with the SHA. Charlie said he's been trying to brute force that SHA, but then it turned out to be a base 64.
Which is way easier to crack.
I could not believe it. I just I've seen it. So sorry for interrupting. I just wanted to let everyone know.
Good job.
Cool. All right. Next slide is USB 3. So substantially faster. I've never heard of anyone referring to it as super speed USB, but I don't know if you'll need to know that. on the exam. I'm gonna what the heck is super speed, but I guess it seems pretty self-explanatory. Theoretical 5 gigabytes per second, I should say. Apparently came out in 2010. Wasn't very popular at the time because it was expensive, just like any new technology coming out. USB 3 is backwards compatible, however, you have to have the port and cable and device to support it. So it's a little annoying because you have to upgrade everything to support it. However, it is worth it. Alrighty. That's actually...
Display port.
Well, yeah, that one is. But
Right.
these are USB 3. Display ports are nice, though, too. Yeah, why does it say prot?
Yeah.
I didn't see that till now. Promise it's not mine. It was not my PC. I'd love to know what manufacturer that is. And how many they shipped out that had that wrong. Theoretically, 127 devices. However, it's not practical because of the shared bandwidth.
Right.
You know, 127, 5 gig, it's pretty slow. You're like basically using USB 2 at that point. I mean, I guess you figure you probably have at least 5 USB devices before you even get into USB drives and external drives. Between your keyboard, mouse, webcam, maybe you have ports in your monitor. But those aren't going to be USB 3 more than likely, because they don't need to be. When you have the capability, you want a powered hub so you're not relying on the power of the port to power the device. You will get better throughput if you have a powered hub. There's generally not a big price difference. I don't know why you would need cable longer than 5 meters, but you can bypass that restriction using USB 3. 5 meters is pretty long. I mean, USB 2, I think 5 meters is 15 feet. So, yeah. So 15 feet, I don't know of anything that I need to be 15 feet away. Yep, over that. You've seen that before. Seen that before. Okay. Always install drivers before inserting the devices, with the exception of plug-and-play devices such as USB drives, basic keyboards and mice. If you have like a fancier keyboard or mouse, you might want to install the driver first, but more than likely you can plug in basic devices like that before you install the driver, and it's not a big deal. Worst case scenario, you unplug it, you uninstall the driver, and then you install the correct driver. So sleeping devices, by default, Windows will enable sleep mode. Yeah, it is. It's a good idea in theory. So it's just an XP menu of the hub. And I'm going to gloss over i394 because it's so rare. Some external drives have it. Up to 63 devices and 4.5 meter maximum cable length. So just general port checks. Is it the device, is it the cable, or maybe the port? After you do those things, check software issues. Try known devices that work, like that USB drive you use every single day for school or whatever. The only way I can figure that happened is with pliers.
I don't know. I got my sister's old computer, and
they're little monsters.
Yeah. I think they
were like
Yeah, probably with teeth.
And this just makes me cry. This right here. It's like it brings back horrible memories of sitting there with needle nose and like just way too much time sitting there bending pins back. I never broke one though. I'm sure I must have been much more angry if that had happened. Keywords, you can disable them, but by default they're enabled. Why you would disable them is beyond me. Kind of dig yourself into a hole.
Maybe if you're trying to lock down the terminal.
Yeah, but then how do you get back in once you...
If you had remote access to it, then that would prevent physical mutual.
I guess.
But
They make it sound like you have to be really careful when cleaning a keyboard. They're pretty durable. The only ones I would be careful with are like mechanical keyboards, because they're not just membrane electronics underneath. As long as they're unplugged when you're cleaning them and they're completely dry when you plug them back in, you're probably going to be okay, regardless of what you use to clean them. Just nothing harsh. Go outside first, put it upside down, and just hit it. And the last 6 months of whatever you ate over your keyboard is in there. It's really gross. So that's just what most keyboards look like. Nice, you can configure things such as reversing left and right mouse buttons, so left is right, right is left. How fast the mouse can move on the screen, the how sensitive it is, and so on. I don't think you're going to see any ball mice anymore.
still find them at Goodwill.
Even I haven't seen him there.
I just did a couple months ago.
Really?
Brought that man, dirty mouse balls. You're trying to game and then it just doesn't roll anymore. You got to clean that link out with rollers.
Yeah, dang it. We're getting there. Yeah. So, yeah, same deal. Here we go.
Yeah.
Memories.
Many hours doing that.
Scanners. So you could potentially use OCR. Basically converting text on whatever you scan to like a Word document. I found it actually worked.
Yeah.
It was pretty reliable. As long as you weren't like scanning a book where it wasn't closed all the way. So there's always GIMP you can use for like a free alternative to Photoshop for editing. Yep. Okay, dots per inch. So it's just the resolution that it scans at, and this also applies to printing resolution. And I'm sure these are improved by now, but nobody really has a scanner. They buy printer combo now. Once again, I haven't really seen a Firewire printer, but I'm sure maybe older ones are out there. Differences in DPI. Really, the most common one is 300, between 300 and 600. 1200 is more like photocopying or photo printing. You'll still find older printers with parallel or SCSI, especially parallel. Don't worry about that. Fingerprint scanners, retinal scanners with voice recognition. Fingerprint scanners have been around for a long time. Retinal scanners, really not so much. Voice recognition is really just kind of becoming popular now. Not for authentication though. So even with biometric, they're spotty enough where you still have passwords in place in case it doesn't work, which means that you could still have your computer cracked by password. Just an example of a barcode. I think this is self-explanatory. You know what a KVM is. It's a way to switch between. Yeah, so you plug in one keyboard and mouse and one monitor, and then you can plug in 2 PCs or more. So you don't have to have multiple stations for each one. Example of joysticks or gamepads. Originally they had sound cards that had game ports built in that you could use. Now they're basically USB. You won't really find them with that port anymore. It's configured essentially the same way you configure any other device in Windows. Nothing really too special about it. Sometimes you need drivers for it. Sometimes Windows has certified drivers that will install with Windows Update. Digitizers, it's just a fancy way of saying a pen that you use that allows you to draw on your computer or use handwriting. That's all it is. And Wacom is a pretty popular company. They make input tablet devices you can use on your computer or laptop. They make smaller ones for laptops. I've actually seen them used at Steve Johnson in their research and development department. They would actually draw out their designs on their screen and do notes around their designs when they had new ideas. So it's kind of cool. Multimedia devices. Kind of did this. I don't really need to. Web cameras, low quality camera. They're pretty good now. Some of them do full digital. I would disagree with this. Now, with the speed that people have with their internet, you can basically do full HD over your internet connection. As long as you don't have DSL, you're going to be okay. Most web cameras now are also plug and play. You just plug them in, they work. However, drivers are easy enough to find, so. Generic configuration screen. Sometimes the camera will come with testing utility to make sure your camera works and it looks good before you end up using it for whatever application. Video. Right. Now there's a section on CRTs that I'm going to skip 95% of because it's not very relevant. So video card handles all video communication between the CPU and monitor, unless it's built-in graphics, in which case you're using a GPU built into the motherboard, which handles it, instead of a physical add-in card. Right. We're just gonna stop at the red bolded things. So phosphors, basically like the pixels on the screen is what they are. And kind of like the way plasmas have some ghosting, CRTs have a similar problem, especially the older ones. Display looks. Huh. Look at, they drew a cobweb in the picture. Right here. Oh, that's good. So horizontal and vertical refresh rate. So horizontal is the speed at which the electron beam moves across the screen, and the vertical refresh rate is the amount of time that the monitor takes to draw the entire screen and get the electron beam back to the start. So basically the vertical refresh rate is how quickly the display can display whatever is changing on the screen. And that's just the pattern it moves when it's updating it, and that happens so quickly, and the only way you can see that is with a camera. You'll see it flickering. Multi-sync monitors support VRR, vertical refresh rate, which is almost all of them. And those are the typical refresh rates. And I think it's either this slide or the next slide. Basically, you have to make sure the refresh rate is correct for the monitor. Otherwise, it won't work, it'll flicker. Yeah, that's about it. Luckily, Windows was smart enough to do a timeout period where you have to actually select that it's working. That would have been lost so many times. Okay. The area of a phospholit at one time is called the picture element or pixel. And then they have all these fun drawings trying to, I think it's really just more confusing. Irrelevant. Calming resolutions, I don't really need to explain. Seriously though, 640 by 480. Your start button's like this big on the screen. Okay. LCD monitors. Welcome to the future. Liquid crystal displays. So apparently zero radiation, less power, thinner, lighter, and they're called flat panels because they are mostly flat. 3 types: passive matrix, dual scan, passive matrix, or thin film transistor, also known as active matrix. Don't really have a better way of saying this. They just work. It's magical. It's a candy corn. They use candy corn. Must be it. So they use electrical charges to bend the light to whatever image they're trying to create, essentially, is what those past 4 slides are trying to say. Yep. Okay. So RGB is just what it uses as the base to produce color, and there's a matrix for each one. So that's kind of the idea, is that it keeps a pattern of how it does it. Similar to the way CRTs do it, but it's a lot more crisp. Yeah, I don't know how this is relevant. Alright, so dual scan refreshes 2 lines at a time, which is much more efficient than the single. Let's see what was official passive matrix. And used in lower end LCDs, but not so much with PCs, fuel pumps, kiosks, and they've been mostly replaced with TFTs, which are most commonly smaller displays. So TFTs are known as active matrix, and they use 1 or more tiny transistors to control each color dot. And they're cheap. I mean, they're really so close. You really just kind of have to determine the tiny differences they have. It's just really the way they present the colors on the screen. When it really comes down to it, it hasn't really changed that much. It's just the shape of the actual technology itself. So backlights illuminate the actual image itself, but they do not project the image. They only provide the light to display it. And there's generally either 1 on the top or bottom, or 1 on each. Sometimes they're on the sides, but it's usually top and bottom. And then they use inverters to power the lights because they use DC voltage, not AC. And then they have a built-in logic board that handles the conversion and process with the matrices to make the colors appear on the screen correctly. And they're actually fluorescent lamps that have mercury in them, and they're like really flimsy, easy to break. You break it between pinky and your thumb. And then there's LEDs, which have been out for a while. Significantly less power use. And they should be cheaper, but they're not. LEDs are really inexpensive. So all LCD monitors have a native display resolution, which is its optimal resolution that it can function at. Generally, laptop LCD displays will default to the native resolution when they have the OS installed. It will automatically detect that resolution. If not, you can just set it to the highest that it will allow you, and it should work fine too. Brightness is apparently measured in nits. Fun fact of the day. Apparently LCDs, the refresh rate is locked at 60 Hertz or 120 Hertz. I would keep that in mind because obviously CRTs have a broad range of refresh rates that they're capable of. In contrast, it's just the difference between the lightest and darkest colors. Rear view and front view. So the difference being projecting from the back of the screen or projecting from the front. Front projectors are higher quality, however they can be in the way, but most of them are front mount. However, if you're in like a theater environment and they're showing a presentation, it's most likely rear view projector, so that it's not visibly seen by the audience. So, lucky kid. right there. I still don't get why he's sitting in the back. Just a projector, you know. Lumens, the amount of light produced by a light source, and this doesn't just relate to a projector, it's any light that you can currently find, but more commonly, if it's not a projector light, just watts. Throw, the amount of distance the actual image can go while keeping the aspect ratio and the actual quality of the image consistent. So lamps themselves get very hot and they're very expensive, so if they're not kept cool enough, they can burn out really easily. And however, they can last a while. So even though they are really expensive, the trade-off is worth it depending on how much you use it. Plasma displays, these have mostly died out due to the burn-in problems they had and ghosting problems. Primarily replaced with LCD and LED now. Yep, just that. Okay. So the actual screen size is measured diagonally in inches, and it doesn't include the bezel around the actual screen itself. And that also applies to TVs themselves. Now, VGA connectors, which is what that is obviously, is mostly died out by now. And you want to avoid it whenever you can because it is an analog connection, whereas DVI-D and I are the most common, and those are digital connections. So DVI, HDMI, and display are all digital connections, and they will have higher quality regardless of what the actual output is. So you definitely want to use this when you can. So the RAM DAC is for basically taking a digital signal from a machine and putting it into analog, which they show here. Basically just an expansion card. I doubt you'll ever find one. It's okay. Did I miss anything? So LCD monitors use digital signals, and if you're inputting an analog, it will convert it to digital, but the quality isn't going to improve. It just can't display analog connections. Yep. So these are the refresh rates that DVI functions at, as well as possible resolutions above what VGA is normally capable of. And then they also have extra pins to support the resolution. I doubt this is true anymore as far as this power usage goes. But the idea behind it is what's to keep in mind. But the actual numbers, you're not going to need to know. Just know that CRTs use a lot more power than LCDs do. Same thing, just... Alright, two major components in display adapters, the video RAM and the processor circuitry. So the video RAM actually stores the video image as it's coming in, and it's constantly changing as you view it. So the data is coming into the RAM and going straight out, and it's constantly cycling. So the GPU is basically a CPU for the graphics. It handles only the graphics, and generally what you'll have is a combination of VRAM and a powerful GPU, which will define how powerful your graphics card is. The more RAM you have, the more a higher quality image you can store, because you have the space and capacity for the image. And you have less load on your GPU because you don't have to go as fast to keep up, because you have the space to hold the image. So it helps, but they are really expensive. Conversion for different resolutions. So just a little bit about color depth, the amount of colors that you have on your screen. And there's more than this now. Transparency features, just the ability to see through your window partially, to be able to see your desktop or any windows behind it, which is nice if you're multitasking. These you want to know. I do remember being tested on these. And definitely include this on your list of things to things to know on the final. So they definitely tested on, they didn't test on the ratio, but I would know like which video modes go with which type of device according to what they have here, or what it says in the book, if it's exactly the same. So I just said that. I don't think you'll find AGP anymore, primarily because it's been replaced by PCIe, which is here. So it's been replaced by PCIe for quite some time now, and it's much faster, uses parallel communication instead of serial, so much faster. Oh, backwards. It uses serial instead of parallel. Common manufacturers, NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel. And that's just one example of a graphics card and some statistics about it. It's the same. No, of course not. Anyway, it's one of NVIDIA's cards that they make. So the GPUs themselves operate in parallel, but the slots they plug into are serial, I guess. The three bottlenecks with the VRAM: data throughput, access speed, and simple capacity. So you can overcome them by having more RAM on your video card, which you can't upgrade, but you can buy a card that has a lot of RAM. And they've been really good about upgrading these by now, so not so much a problem anymore. They might try to confuse you about standard RAM and VRAM technologies, so make sure you don't get caught up with the difference between these. So like these down are basically identical, so these up here you should know that it's only graphics related. So there's a balance between price and the amount of RAM you get. And obviously the more you have, the more expensive it is. So it all depends on what you need. Despite what it says here, most high-end motherboards that I've seen don't have built-in graphics. So you have to buy a card separate. Which is fine, because usually when you're buying those high-end boards anyway, you have the money to pay for it. But with the older ones, it was almost always built in. Integrated GPUs that are on the motherboard are known as APUs, but you'll hear them almost always referred to as GPUs. But when manufacturers refer to laptop GPUs, they'll call them APUs. So just know they're interchangeable. But of course, APUs do not describe chips that are on graphics cards. Yep, kind of did that. Lower end video card, which you can tell by the VGA connector. DisplayPort's not only popular on Macs, despite what it says here. Okay. There's one. That's not a Mac, that's a Dell. Nice try. See what you did there, trying to get us to buy Macs. This video, nobody uses this video anymore. Video card, you may see TV out if you have a tuner card. Regular video cards, you won't have them, but tuner cards are nice if you want to do it yourself. Kind of a TV, recording TV, or if you want to watch TV through your computer, you can do that. And then just some composite connection converters and whatnot. Various connections you could have. Oh, mini HDMI. I hate those because no one has that cable. You have to have the adapter from mini to regular HDMI. And you have to have it if you have like an ultrabook or a thinbook. Obviously, because the other ones are too tall. But. So procedures, physical install, video install drivers, display applet if you have one. So an example is AMD Control Catalyst Control Center, and then update drivers if that wasn't done first. So primary issues that you should determine before you even buy it: is the card too long to fit? Is it too tall to fit? Do you even have a slot in your machine that supports that card? Will it fit next to your other cards, etc. Built-in drivers are generally not a good idea, especially with video cards, because they can be pretty finicky, and you may not get the full functionality of the card with Windows drivers. Yep. So extending, basically utilizing your second, third, most graphics. There are many graphics cards that support like up to 6 displays now or more. Nobody has 6 displays, but you could potentially extend your desktop instead of duplicating it by doing that. And then you can rearrange them. Apparently there's not a slide for that, but Then once again, you can just change the refresh rate here, and you can change that per monitor if you have multiple monitors. And then you can have themes just to make it look pretty, or make your own. You can download more. XP display settings didn't really have themes then. I mean, not really. It kind of worked. Yeah. So you can change the window color around your windows if you so choose. Windows 8 will ask you during setup if you want to do it. Power management. So to keep in mind when you're setting your screen up, if you want a screensaver, which no longer is necessary, but some people like screensavers. So you can set if you want it to turn on in 10 minutes, an hour, or more. And if you want it to go to the lock screen when someone tries to move the mouse or hits the keyboard, which is common for a business environment for security reasons. If someone walks away and forgets to lock it. Power plan, you can adjust everything from when you want the display to automatically turn off after the computer has been idle, if it goes to sleep on its own. If you have a laptop, what happens when you close the lid. You can change what happens if it's plugged in and you close the lid, or not plugged in when you close the lid. Just some of the stuff you can do. And then here's the screen where you can rearrange your desktop monitors. So then you're not dragging to the right to get to your left monitor or something like that. It's just a visual way to rearrange everything. And this is what it looks like in Windows 7 if you only have one monitor in this case. Dual monitor 7. 3 monitors. In this case, this person's third monitor is not being used. There's actually some Dell laptops where the display adapter has a fault built into it that they didn't account for, where you can't use 2 external monitors and the laptop display simultaneously. You can only use 2 displays. So one monitor in the laptop's display, or just the laptop display. Silly design. Very frustrating for someone who wanted 3 displays. So, something you want to keep in mind when you're installing a adapter, or any device for that matter, make sure that the adapter is actually showing up as its device name, showing up as generic PNP display or what have you. Then you have a driver issue. I mean, that's one of the signs. There's many other ways you can find out that the wrong one is installed, but okay. Yep. So you could also adjust things like portrait or landscape mode. I don't see portrait used very often. I did see it used once at my last job, and it was with someone who had dual screens, and they did a lot of documentation and word processing. So they wanted to be able to see more of their document at once. So they had one screen that was portrait, and would view everything down the screen. Other than that, I didn't see it. And of course there's monitor settings to adjust this stuff as well. You can always roll back drivers. It's kind of a nice feature if you try to update the driver and then it goes south on you. So you can try that out. I found that actually works. Wolfenstein 3D. It was a fun game.
measure those pixels with a ruler.
But you know what? That game is still fun today.
Oh, bro.
So is Doom. Doom is fun too. Just some older technology known as AMD's 3D now. In case you have never dealt with 3D objects. Not sure how this is really relevant. Hey guys, you know that graphic rendering. Kind of a fun facts kind of area. DirectX, kind of one of the primary functionality pieces of software that allows 3D to occur. I think they're on 12, maybe? Something like that. Regardless, your graphics card will tell you which DirectX version it supports. Make sure you're buying one for whatever game you need. So if you need a card that supports 11 because you're playing a higher-end game that needs 11, make sure you end up buying 2 cards. It's just DXDiag is a utility to diagnose DirectX. Not really needed anymore. DirectX is kind of a set and forget. Kind of the same process for video card errors as other drivers. Just kind of verify to see if it's a driver issue, software issue, or hardware issue. Hardware issues, usually the RAM has gone bad or the fan has gone bad. So if the fan has gone bad, it just gets really hot and starts kind of glitching out. Faulty hardware symptoms, so you kind of see garbage like this on the screen. That's really bad. I've never seen something that bad. I've seen stuck pixels like they describe. I think here. No, something like that. Just some basic, things to keep in mind. Just wait here for a second. Just absorb this. Yeah. I would say most people will never have to open a monitor. So, once again, probably the most common cause is just cable connections or the cable itself. Usually the monitor isn't going to be bad. Usually it's a cable problem, so go to that first. Yeah, of course, monitors go bad, but most commonly it is the cable. Bird chirping noises. It's funny. Hissing noises. Okay. Degaussing coil. Remember when first did that? It scared the heck out of me. So apparently cracked LCD monitors are not repairable. I can't relate to that. Flickering image, too much light from the backlight, or a dying backlight, dim image could be the same thing. Backlight failing. If the LCD goes dark, bad inverter or lamp. Bad pixels. See below. Kind of what it looks like. Maybe next time a monitor fails, try to open it and check it out. Don't hurt yourself. Do not use window cleaners. I'm going to modify this. Do not use window cleaners directly on it. Put it on a cloth first. Because I found that it works fantastic. Just don't spray it directly on it and you'll be okay. Because if it seeps down or in the sides, then who knows where it's gone. And I'm gonna displays. Having a display that doesn't support it. Yep. Not worrying about that. Yay! Got anything?
You got one more week?